Okay, hello. This is the lecture video for chapter 13, which is entitled The Age of Dissent and Division. So this chapter basically focuses on the aftermath of the Renaissance and the aftermath of the Black Plague. Because if you ever took Western Civ 1, which is not a requirement for this course, but if you have, it's kind of like a refresher as to what happened in terms of politics and also in terms of religion within Europe during this time frame. So think of why the chapter is entitled The Age of Dissent and Division. So why did this occur? Why did people of Europe start to lose faith in the Roman Catholic Church? So a lot of those is kind of twofold, as I mentioned. So with the Black Death, what ended up happening was people needed somebody to blame. So they thought, why was God providing, this type of epidemic, this type of pandemic to Europe? Why were so many people killed? They were losing faith with that. They were also losing faith in the papacy as well, because the papacy started to falter them too. So with that came about the rise of different Protestant reformants, different Protestant leaders that this chapter specifically focuses on. So one of the main ones is Martin Luther. So Martin Luther basically said that the Bible convinced him that God's justice lay in his mercy and not the power of damnation. Because of course people feared, death. They feared where they were going to go at the time of their death. Are they going to go to heaven? Did they reach to the point where they can achieve it on their own? Or did they need God's grace to do it? Or did they need good deeds to get there? So there was a variety of different things that were causing people to kind of follow Luther with his whole entire belief system as well. Another thing that happened is that the papacy was starting to grant indulgences. So indulgences is basically you would provide, your priest or you would provide your bishop with money. So in terms of providing the money, then you would kind of be paying your way to get to heaven. Martin Luther basically damned that. He basically said, hey, there's no way that you can basically pay your way to get into heaven. And that's basically like a money-making scheme that unfortunately the church did get involved with and the papacy did as well. So Luther didn't care for that. He basically said that you just needed grace, you needed to do good deeds, follow the commandments, everything else. That's how you can get to heaven to be with God. Luther also had a hostile relationship with Pope Leo X, who is heavily discussed in the chapter as well. So what I would like you to do is kind of focus on their relationship. Why did Pope Leo dislike Luther? What kind of relationship did they have? And then basically weigh the pros and cons between each of them as well, just as you're reading through the book. Another thing is that you want to think about the spread of these Protestant religions. So the book focuses heavily on Germany, which at this point in time, Germany isn't really the Germany that we know today. So at this point in time, Germany is still known as the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire is made up of thousands of I guess they're not even united at this point in time, just loose provinces. Each of the provinces is actually led by a prince, typically, sometimes even a princess. So they would basically decide what their religion was. So one province may say that they want to follow Lutheranism, another one may be Catholic. So it highly depended on what the prince actually decided as their form of religion. So basically there's a good map within the chapter that kind of shows you how the Holy Roman Empire was laid out, and then of course their religious backing as well. Okay. The chapter also focuses on other Protestant faiths that were starting to come to the forefront. So one of them, of course, was the Calvinist movement, specifically founded by John Calvin, which was heavily worshipped within France and then, of course, parts of Switzerland as well. So that's just one thing to kind of focus on too. The book then jumps into England. So England at this point in time is Roman Catholic, and that was basically due to its leader. So the leader at that point in time was King Henry VIII, which I'm sure all of you know all about. So King Henry VIII was probably well known for all of his marriages, right? He had a lot of wives and everything else. So King Henry at this point in time was Roman Catholic. So of course, what he wanted to get a divorce. And unfortunately, in the Catholic Church, you're not allowed that at that point in time. So he had a marriage to Catherine of Aragon, who was from Spain. She was, of course, Catholic. Unfortunately, she could not bear him the child that he wanted. Of course, like any other king at this point in time, they're going to want to look for a male heir. So King Henry, unfortunately, could not get that male heir from her. So what he ended up wanting was a divorce so that way he could get remarried to somebody else. In this case, he wanted to marry Anne Boleyn. So once again, Anne Boleyn only granted him the daughters that he had, but not the son that he wanted. So continually, he basically went on his search of marriages to try to obtain that male heir. He finally ended up getting a male heir, Edward VI, and that was actually by his third wife, Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour basically was also of Protestant faith at this point in time when he actually founded, prior to this, the Church of England. Unfortunately, Henry did die in 1553, and then all of England became Protestant. So very similarly to the Holy Roman Empire, what ends up happening is that with England, the religion basically was dependent on the ruler. So if the ruler was Protestant, then all of the people would have to be Protestant or worship Protestantism. If the ruler was Catholic, then the same thing would happen. The people basically had to worship Catholicism. So of course, there's going to be hostility between people, between the two groups as well. So it honestly just depended on, who the ruler was at that point in time within England. After Henry ended up passing away, the one person that took over was Mary Tudor. So Mary Tudor actually she ended up restoring Protestantism, but honestly, the religion basically, like I said, depended on the ruler. So there's going to be constant toggling within England between both the Protestant faith and also the Catholic faith as well. And we'll see that not only in England, but also in other countries as well in Europe at this point in time. So in a nutshell, basically in chapter 13, age of dissent and division has to do with religion. It also has to do with the constant changing between two different faiths, basically dependent on who the ruler is at that point in time. So honestly, at this point in time, it's a little bit of chaos, unfortunately. But that basically kind of set the groundwork for everything else that's going to be going on in Europe soon afterwards. Because after this, we're going to be talking about changes that are going to be coming about. We're also going to talk about different revolutions that are going to start to spark up. So all these things are just going to come from the forefront of the discussion of religion that we're going to talk about now in chapter 13. All right, thanks.